بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. We are on Surah Al-Qasas, Surah number 28 and ayah number 36. Surah Al-Qasas, which is the story. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فلما جاءهم موسى بآياتنا قالوا ما هذا إلا سحر مفترى وما سمعنا بهذا في آبائنا الأولين قال موسى ربي أعلم بمن جاء بالهدى من عنده ومن تكون له عاقبة الدار إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. With the story of Musa alayhi salam going to Fir'awn after his appointment as a messenger with his brother Harun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here in this surah a dialogue which is mentioned in other surahs with different words, but almost the same meaning, but definitely the same message. In this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then so when Musa came to them and brought them our signs that were clear and evident, قالوا, they, referring to the people of Fir'awn and Fir'awn himself, they all declared, مَا هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ مُفْتَرَى. All of this is nothing except a sihr. It is a jadoo, it is witchcraft and magic, which has been invented and fabricated. And we have not heard of this in the annals of our forefathers, the people who came before us. They never informed us about such magic, and they never informed us about people who claimed that they spoke to God or God spoke to them. And they did not mention anything that Musa and his brother are mentioning. This is a very condensed version of what happened. As you know, in Surah Al-Araf and in Surah Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses the issue. Surah Al-Shu'ara also we did it, that Musa alayhi salam went in front of Fir'awn, and Fir'awn started to rebuke him and accuse him again of fleeing the country as a fugitive, and said that he was wanted under the law as a fugitive, and then mentioned to Musa all the favors that he had done to him, raised him in his palace, gave him everything under the sun, literally, and so on. Then there was an exchange, and then a meeting and a gathering was summoned where the magicians came and they threw their staffs in the arena and the amphitheater, and Musa alayhi salam overwhelmed them. He defeated them and their witchcraft, their magic and their sorcery. So Fir'awn and his people in that civilization, witchcraft and magic and all of this occult sciences were on the rise, and people were very familiar with such practices. They were not familiar with witchcraft and magic as being real. Okay? Where Musa alayhi salam, when he threw his staff down, what happened was that the staff became a serpent, a snake. But the serpent and the snake was not a hallucination, as it is in witchcraft, where there's a power of suggestion, right? That the onlooker will believe it is, but is not in reality. With the mu'jiza, with the miracle, the staff actually becomes a real snake. Therefore, it is a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ability to do this. And that is why the snake then got gobbled up all the other snakes that were false, and they were just actually ropes. Okay? So they could not understand this to be anything except a higher form of sihr and witchcraft. So this is how they plotted and schemed and strategized to defeat Musa alayhi salam and whatever he was presenting to them. Okay. Meaning that these signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not convince Fir'awn and his people that he was a Nabi and that he was sent from Allah for a number of reasons. One is that Fir'awn himself declared to be the highest God. And number two, the people in Egypt at that time were so accustomed to a very luxurious standard of living that the lifestyle that Musa was now presenting would uproot their lifestyle in totality. So in order to preserve their lifestyle and in order to preserve the kingdom of Fir'awn, they then accused Musa of further witchcraft and inventing ideals that were not part of their civilization. Musa alayhi salam, being a Nabi of Allah and being a Rasul, obviously was very clever and smart. As you know, he was raised in the palace himself. He knew the pros and cons of debate, and he knew the ins and outs of rhetoric, and he knew how to negotiate, and how to be diplomatic, and how to be straightforward. So with Nubuwwah, Nubuwwah then further enhanced his intellect even more. So the intellect of a Nabi is always very high to begin with, and with Nubuwwah it is further accentuated, and he becomes even more of an intellectual. So Musa, in a very calm way, now retorts and describes what he knows, and then, as you can see from the wordings that the Quran uses, it is a very unique method of overcoming the false allegations of people. وقال موسى ربي أعلم بمن جاء بالهدى من عنده. Musa then said that my Lord, who is not you, you claim to be the Lord of all people and the highest Lord. Musa immediately retorts and says, no. First of all, let's get one thing straight, and that is I have a Lord who is not you. So the one who is my Lord, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a'lamu, knows much more than I do and than what you do. Okay? So Allah's knowledge is infinite, it is absolute, it is eternal, and our knowledge is finite, and it is not absolute and definitely not eternal. So, first of all, you are not my Lord, you did not make me, you did not create me. And number two, you don't know anything. Because Allah knows much more than you and me put together. A'lamu, so He is much more knowledgeable and aware of whom? بِمَنْ جَاءَ بِالْهُدَى, of the one who is on guidance. Okay. So my Lord knows, and my Lord He guides. Okay. My Lord is not someone who does not have knowledge, nor is He one who leads people astray. Whereas if we look at your track record, oh Fir'awn, you lead everybody astray. You are nothing except deception, and you are nothing except manipulation, and you are nothing except a tyrant. And that is not the meaning of a Lord, because the Lord is very compassionate, the Lord is very graceful, the Lord is very gracious, and the Lord knows how to develop without manipulating. So this is how Musa alayhi salam now comes into the realm of debate. Okay? Prophetic debates is a norm with prophets. Prophets do debate. Okay? So Muslim must appreciate the art of debating. Okay? وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا آتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ. These were the proofs and evidences we gave to Ibrahim against his people, meaning the Prophet's intellect is supreme and powerful, and the Prophet will engage in a meaningful discussion and a debate without shying away from the truth. They don't stand there apologizing for who they are, what they are, who Allah is, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. They will stand there with a spine and a backbone and say, this is what I believe in. I'm a free man, and I have the freedom to express who and what I believe in, and I have the freedom to know what I believe in is the truth, and I have the intelligence to prove it. Right. They don't back down from debates. They're not pussycats. Meaning that if you want intellectual debate, I'll give you one. We're not here just because we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we bow down and we make sajda and we say subhanallah. No. We bow down in front of Allah, but we don't bow down in front of anyone else besides Allah. Right? That's the difference. Today people bow down in front of people, but they don't bow down in front of Allah. So this now is the result of Musa alayhi salam's Nubuwwah and his prophethood. Min indihi, from his side, he guides from his side. وَمَنْ تَكُونَ لَهُ عَاقِبَةُ الدَّارِ. Not only that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also knows the consequences of the actions of people. Okay? He knows the consequences of the dar, the abode of this life. That he knows what's going to happen to people before they die, when they die, and after they die. So his knowledge is beyond our imagination, beyond our grasp, and beyond our perception, and beyond any conception that we may have. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this knowledge to prophets. So who gives us knowledge about what's going to happen after death? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fir'awn, you say that you have raised everybody and you are their Lord and you have given them security and luxuries, but you don't know what's going to happen to them after they die, because you don't know what's going to happen to you after you die. So your kingdom is all but incomplete, and your authority over people is terminated once they die, because you won't have any authority. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's authority will continue even after people die. إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Indeed, the fact of the matter is that He will never give success to anyone who's an oppressor. Anyone who's a tyrant will not be successful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give success to those people who oppress and who do wrong. And this is now a social vice and a social evil, where people who rule must appreciate that the people whom they rule must not be treated with injustice and with tyranny and with oppression. So in the scheme of the dunya, meaning in terms of how we behave in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give any success to those who trample over the rights and emotions of other people who are innocent. That is not the norm of this world, and definitely not the norm of the other world. Some people may get away with tyranny and murder, but eventually on the Day of Judgment they will be called in front of everybody to answer for their oppression and answer for their crimes and their sins. This is what Musa is saying. Okay? So you can imagine the awe now. Okay? If you imagine the spectacle in front of Fir'awn, where he has a huge throne, and he has soldiers on both sides, and this is his court, and he has dignitaries, and he has ministers, and he has people in the gallows, in the audience, and now Musa is saying this in front of Fir'aun. Can you imagine that? Yeah, it's a spectacle. You have to create in your mind this spectacle so that you understand the might of Musa alayhi salam in front of the tyranny and oppression of Fir'aun. Right. As the Prophet ﷺ said, أفضل الجهاد كلمة حق عند سلطان جائر. That the best form of jihad is what? That you speak a word of truth in front of an oppressive king. And that's not easy. Why? Because are you ready for the consequences? One thing is say, I don't agree with the king, and the other thing is say that if I say this, I'm going to go to jail and I'll be imprisoned, I might even be killed. Are you ready for that? Right. If you're not ready for that, then don't make too much noise. Because that is what happens. Right? When you speak the truth, you must be ready for the consequences of speaking the truth. You can't make noise for the sake of making noise. Musa alayhi salam, first of all, he's not afraid of Fir'awn because he knows him. He raised him, right? He was like his adopted son. I know you, inside out. I know your court, I know your civilization, I know your culture, I know your system. Number two, you are nothing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now he's demonstrating the might and the power and the intellectual dexterity of a Nabi with these words. And you can imagine it was pin drop silence. Who is Musa to say this to Fir'awn, the greatest ruler on earth? وقال فرعون يا أيها الملأ ما علمت لكم من إله غيري. Fir'aun, obviously, he's not a pushover. He's also very smart and sophisticated. He knows how to rile up and wind up the crowd, and he knows how to control and how to mesmerize with his speech, and how he has ruled with authority for so many decades. He knows. Okay. So he then engages in a form of dialogue that is now somewhat different from what Musa alayhi salam is saying. When Musa alayhi salam is only expressing the truth, Fir'aun now tunes into his art of manipulation, and he starts to manipulate the people. And he says, "Oh chieftains, oh chiefs, I'm not addressing people there, over there. They're not worth addressing. I'm addressing you. You are the leaders of the community. You maintain my kingdom for me. So I'm addressing you, O council, that I don't know of any God besides me for you. The only God I know for you is me. Meaning that if you see me as your benefactor, and if you see me as your provider, then I don't know anyone who is more suitable to be your God than me." Right. He's manipulating their mind. So now there's power of suggestion through now witchcraft and magic, and there's a power of suggestion through words, as the Prophet said, وَإِنَّ لَفِي الْبَيَانِ لَسِحْرًا. إِنَّ فِي الْبَيَانِ لَسِحْرًا. It's an expression, there's magic. Right. So you can have the power of suggestion, hypnotize people by your speech, and this is what Fir'aun is doing. So the magicians, they fail. Fir'aun says, I'm not going to fail. I know how to manipulate the minds of people. I know how to manipulate the minds of my generals and my officers and my ministers. So I'm going to do that. مَا عَلِمْتُ لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرِي. I don't know of any other God for you except me. And I'm going to prove it to you. So now, in Fir'aun's now huge ministry, there were many engineers. If you know about the Egyptian civilization, we know that they were great builders, right? And from their buildings there were the pyramids. So there was this master engineer, okay, the master architect in Fir'aun's now ministry. His name was Haman, right? Some of the ulama of tafsir have now provided evidence to us that the word Haman in the original meaning during the time of Fir'aun was engineer. The word Haman was a title given to the chief engineer. So the Quran is now representing that reality. So Fir'aun says, فَأَوْقِدْ لِي يَا هَامَانُ. So now kindle a fire for me, O Haman, meaning that you are the chief engineer, and you know how to build. As we all know, the Egyptians built, and they built everything. And we're still mesmerized as to how they built the pyramids. The Quran doesn't go into what they built. The Quran goes into a different now element. It's not the building, but the builder. You're amazed with the pyramids. Why don't you just fascinate over the fact that somebody built it? Now, who is that somebody who built that? Haman. So we're going to tell you what happened to Haman also. Never mind the pyramids. The person who built the pyramids, now he's someone we must understand and discuss. So Fir'aun now is the ruler, under his rule and kingdom, he has these geniuses. Meaning that the mark of a ruler is how great his engineers are. Right? Without buildings, you wouldn't have a civilization, and you wouldn't have an empire. Right? If you didn't have grand buildings in the state capital, any capital, then you wouldn't say underdeveloped countries. Developed countries means what? Buildings, grand buildings, and you have architects, and you have geniuses, and the people who do this and do that for you. So the Quran is now opening up in this story, the story. You must understand that Fir'awn was not saying that he is their God and their Lord for no reason. The reason he's saying that because he said that the proof is in the pudding. I've given you this luxurious lifestyle and culture and civilization because I have all of these people underneath me, and they all worship me. So if they worship me, why don't you worship me? Okay. On my command, they build pyramids. On my command, they build, as you see in Surah Al-Surah and other places in the Quran, they build these gardens and these orchards and these vineyards and these streams and all of these wonderful inamat and blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So now, who does this for you? It is my command, Fir'aun saying. So, Ya Haman, O Haman, I'm commanding you as my chief engineer and my chief architect that you must kindle a fire for me, al-tini, upon mud, meaning that get your incinerators going and get your engineering crew and everybody together so that they have a huge now capacity to bake now bricks. Al-tin. Tell them that I need to build a huge monument, a tall monument that takes me to the heavens and the skies. So can you imagine the amount of work that's needed for that? The amount of skill that's needed for that, the amount of manpower, the amount of raw material that's needed for that. Right? It doesn't come easily. So who has this ability? Only an emperor. Right? Understand the story the way perhaps you might depict it in Hollywood. See the picture in front of you. Not that Hollywood would do justice to anything. I'm just saying that for the sake of us understanding the Quran, every word in the Quran counts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using these words. They say, Haman, you are the chief engineer, and I want you to ignite this furnace for me so that you are able to manufacture all of these bricks. And these bricks will allow you to do what? فَاجْعَلْ لِي صَرْحًا. And then construct for me a lofty tower, huge tower. So who has the ability to do this? Only the emperor. Meaning that it takes years and decades to build the Taj Mahal, right? Have you ever wondered how many decades it took, and how much material it took, and how many people had to die to build something, a monument for someone who already was dead in the first place, right? So building is not a joke. Right? You manage your own house, and it just takes time, money, effort, frustration. Right? Taking care of your house is not easy. Now, Fir'awn is saying, hey, I'm going to build a tower. Huge tower. I have the manpower, the material, I have the ability, I have everybody in front of me, and I won't need to blink because Haman will do this for me. On my command, he'll do it for me. So now he's showing his power, his authority, and his dexterity, and his ability to understand what Musa a.s. is saying, that I'm going to prove to you, O Musa, that you are not God, and nor is your God my God. I'm your God. لَعَلِّي أَطَّلِعُ إِلَهِ Musa. And the reason I want you to build this huge construction so that I may now come upon the God of Musa. I want to meet him. You see, he is the God, and if the God is there, he's not on land because I'm on land. So the God of Musa must be up there. So I'm going to go and visit him up there. Right. You heard of the space program? He didn't back away. Fir'awn did not back away from the challenge either. That's why he was Fir'awn. He said, I'm going to show you who is God. وَإِنِّي لَأُظُنُّهُ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ I indeed believe him, meaning Musa, to be a liar, that he is not telling the truth, and I'm going to show you within the next 2 years, 5 years, however long it takes Haman to build this building, that I'm going to go there, and I'm going to meet him, and I'm going to defeat him. I have the ability to do so. Okay. The Quran doesn't mention explicitly what happened. But however, we can read in between the lines, and we know that Haman did build this huge tower, this burj, and it went very, very high up. How high, we don't know, but we can assume that it made high. If you can build something like the skyscrapers in Chicago, very easily, I'm sure he was able to build quite a large skyscraper, right, over there in Egypt. And he actually went up onto the skyscraper. He took his bow and arrow, and other stories that are mentioned in the Israeliyat, the accounts of the Jewish traditions. We don't need to mention those, but it is quite plausible that he did go up. He did look for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there, but obviously Allah is not going to appear to him the way he appeared to Musa alayhi salam. Musa said, I went and I saw and met God, spoke to God where? Mount Sinai. So Fir'aun said, I'm going to make a tower that is going to be much taller than Mount Sinai. If I can't find him, that means you're lying. Why is he saying Musa is lying? He said, Mount Sinai is 300 feet, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, whatever it is. I'm going to build a building that's 2,000 feet, twice the size of Mount Sinai. If I don't see him, that means Musa is lying. You understand the relation? وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّهُ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ I believe that he's a liar. How will Fir'aun prove that he's a liar? By building this building. So that's what I mean by reading in between the lines. Yes, it is quite plausible that he climbed the building, and he didn't find Allah, because Allah does not appear that way to anyone whenever anyone wants to meet him. He only appears to those whom he chooses. So this is how Fir'aun then convinced his people that Musa is a liar because I didn't see him when I went up there, meaning his Lord, his God. وَاسْتَكْبَرَ هُوَ وَجُنُودُهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ وَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا يُرْجَعُونَ And then he was very proud and arrogant. He showed his pride and his arrogance, he and his now troops and his armies on earth. That's the beginning of the story. Starts with the idea that in the Fir'awn ala fil ard, that Fir'aun he raised himself on earth, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like the idea of someone raises himself on earth, because he was supposed to bow down to Allah on earth and gravitate towards the ground and not go towards the heavens in order to meet Allah. So here Allah is using the same example, a parable, to show, and this will come up again at the end of the surah, that the whole theme of the surah is making sure that people who don't bow down to Allah and they want to elevate themselves physically or any otherwise in the world, they are now debased. بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ without any truth, without any right to do so. Meaning if you have the right to someone, and you want to make sure that you are not violated, then you may rise above someone and demand and dictate your right. That is one thing. Bil haqq, with the truth. What is bighayr al haqq? You have no right to do so. Okay? People are innocent, and people need to be treated fairly and justly, but you're not doing so. So without any right, without any haqq, without any truth, you are trying to exploit them. You and your army both. وَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا يُرْجَعُونَ And they actually believed that they will not be returning to us, meaning there is no day of judgment and there is no hisab, there is no accountability. So this mindset of being above the law and above retribution and being above any kind of justice will eventually lead people to their own destruction, that people believe that they are invincible and no one can conquer them because they are above everybody else. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is depicting the mindset and the psyche and the climate of people who were there with Fir'awn and worshipping Fir'awn and worshipping all the luxuries of the dunya, so that they would not have to concede to whatever death would bring them. فَأَخَذْنَاهُ جُنُودَهُ فَنَبَذْنَاهُمْ فِي الْيَمِّ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now mentions again in short form, in a very concise, condensed way in this surah, what was the fate of Fir'awn. So Musa alayhi salam said, Allah knows, my Lord knows the fate of people in this world and also in the world hereafter. Allah now says this was the fate of Fir'awn and his people, his armies, his troops, his soldiers, the power and might that they had. All of that was to no avail. So Allah says, we caught them, we captured them, and we took them or punished them together. Both him and his troops, and then we flung them. We flung them into the sea, the Red Sea. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that with one strike of the staff, Allah constructed pathways from the sea so that the 12 tribes of the Banu Israel and Musa alayhi salam's people would be able to cross over. Well, it probably took Haman 5 years, 10 years to build that building. You want to talk about power of creation? This is the power of creation. The creation was now through the striking of one staff, and that is Allah's power. It is not human power, but it was real. It was not imaginary. It was not hallucination. And because it was real, that's how the tribes crossed. And then with another strike on the other side, it became what it became, meaning the sea. And that is where the people of Fir'awn perished, and they drowned there. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing us in a very concise, condensed way, the short form of the story, that if you want to represent and depict a story, you can do so if the reader already knows the details of the story. And since this story was revealed after the other surahs, Surah Al-Araf, Surah Al-Shu'ara, and others, now the reader already knows. So now, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing to this story is the art of condensing in very succinct words a story that means so much to everybody. So here the point is that anyone who claims to be greater than all the human beings, he will perish. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this happen for Fir'awn and his people. Okay. فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الظَّالِمِينَ. And now, O you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you must observe and look and see what is the fate and the eventual consequence of those who are oppressors and tyrants and wrongdoers. Meaning, Fir'awn perished because of his wrongdoing. Okay. What caused this divine disaster to come upon Fir'awn? Fir'awn's own wrongdoing. It wasn't that God had a personal vendetta against Fir'awn or anybody. That's not the way it works. Okay, so divine punishment comes not because the divine is always angry and is always out to kill everybody on the planet. No. The divine has an order in this world. What is that order? That if you are unjust and ruthless and you are an oppressor, then you will not be able to cheat life. Life will get the better of you. Right? That's cause and effect. So wherever there's a cause, there'll be an effect. Oppression will lead you to your destruction. That's the rule. And that's Allah's rule. That's God's rule on earth. If you are a tyrant and you do something wrong in this world, you will face the consequences, some of them, in this world. Right? The eventual consequence of the sin, Allah will mete out, God forbid, on the Day of Judgment. But the consequence of wrongdoing, you may face that here in this world. Now, if you escape this world, Allah will catch you in the other world, but most people don't escape this world. Okay, فَانظُرْ, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reflect and think and observe as to what is the fate of those who are wrongdoers. So this fate is about the fate of Fir'awn in the dunya, right? Because the fate of Fir'awn in the akhir is mentioned afterwards. So this, people like Ibn Khaldun and others say this is the norm of the dunya. This is how now nations rise and fall. That if you want to maintain a civilization, your civilization must be built upon principles of justice and not principles of oppression. And when a nation does not stand up against oppression, that nation is doomed for destruction. So in a way it's good that people stand up for justice. There's still something there. It's keeping the nation going. May Allah give us all justice and Tawheed and Islam, which is the ultimate justice. So that is a good sign. So here we see that Fir'awn perished and his troops, his armies also perished, not only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to punish the Fir'awn in this world, but also because of Fir'awn's own actions and oppression and his own tyranny. That is something we must also appreciate in this world. The past, I would say, several millenniums of human history has shown us that oppressors always lose, tyrants are always replaced, and if nothing, then they die at least. No one lives forever. No one is that invincible that they live forever. And this is the aqibah, the consequence of those who do bad deeds. There's a consequence for those who do good deeds also, as we know, and that is also mentioned later on in the surah, at the end of the surah. وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا يُنصَرُونَ. This is how it is. So now we rendered them into being leaders, ai But what kind of leaders? That they call others towards the fire, ultimate destruction, and the punishment, divine punishment, on the day of judgment. Okay? Meaning that there are two forms and two types of leaders. One leader will call you towards salvation, and the other leader will call you towards hell. Okay? So which leader do you want to be? And this is obviously an indictment against Muslims who want to lead people towards the betterment of the world at the expense of being in the fire. So this is your political science. You understand Islamic political science? Understand this ayah. The Fir'awn and his people were leaders. They were a great civilization, arguably one of the greatest ever. Right? As we still see the remnants of their civilization in Egypt today. Nobody will deny that. But what happened? What happened is that they led their people astray. So when leaders lead people astray, then they have a consequence. What is that? وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا يُنصَرُونَ. On the day of judgment, they will not be assisted. They will have no support on the day of judgment. They will no longer be leaders on the day of judgment because everybody will abandon them and disown them in front of the might and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So now, in your political theory, if you want to be a political theorist, from the point of view of what Islam says about political theory, then you must incorporate the akhirah in the discussion, which is mentioned at the end of the surah. If you do not add the akhirah in this discussion, you will not be assisted on the day of judgment. You might get your 2 cents of glory in this world. But on the day of judgment, وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا يُنصَرُ. No assistance, no support will be coming to you on the day of judgment, because that's the day of hisab. That is the day of deen and judgment. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning the early Muslims also, that you are being oppressed by the Quraysh. So this is a Makki surah. This surah is revealed in Makkah, not in Medina. So this is before the Hijrah. So the Muslims are few and they're saying they're being oppressed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is informing the Sahaba that look, The people of Musa alayhi salam were tormented by a much higher, a much more invincible power than the Quraysh. But they did not survive. And they were destroyed in this world. So now you think that the Quraysh is oppressive? You think that Abu Jahl is oppressive? You think that these people are now not playing with the rules of justice? Then read this story, the story of Musa, and you will see that you will gain a tremendous solidarity and psychological resistance. If you read the story of Musa alayhi salam, Allah helped Musa because Musa and his people were innocent. Allah destroyed Fir'awn because Fir'awn and his people were oppressive and they are wrongdoers. So this was the boost that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave through this story to the Sahaba, through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, meaning this story was not revealed in a vacuum. It was revealed for the Sahaba, so the Sahaba would understand that one day will come when if these people do not stop their oppression, they will also perish in this world, and that happened in Badr a few years later. 70 were killed and 70 were held captives, made prisoners of war from the Quraysh. Very quickly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help came. So the idea that Muslims are always oppressed is one thing, and the idea that Muslims need to know how to seek Allah's madad and assistance is another thing. Madad and assistance comes from our good deeds, our sense of purity, our sense of taqwa, our sense of piety, and our sense of being just and noble. Madad and help doesn't come from assuming leadership for the sake of the dunya, for the sake of the world, because that is short-lived. Once you promote that as a theory for Muslim success, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already mentioned, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. He doesn't give any zalim any success. That is not how Allah operates in this world. وَأَتْبَعْنَاهُمْ فِي هَذِهِ الدُّنْيَا لَعْنَةً. And then we caused some more curse to follow them in this world. I mean, even in this world, after they died and after they drowned in the sea, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them more curse upon them, so that they were even more ridiculed and even more looked down upon and scoffed upon. And even today, people are still making movies of what? The Red Sea crossing. Who are the villains there? They're still depicted as villains, not the heroes. Yeah. This is a lana, this is a curse from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It continues because this was the state of their mind. They were the ultimate oppressors. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ هُمْ مِنَ الْمَقْبُوحِينَ. And then furthermore, on the day of judgment, they will be detested and they will be hated. Meaning when people look at them on the day of judgment, they will not see them as leaders of the free world, as people who gave now freedom, liberty and justice and the pursuit of happiness to everybody in the world. They will be scoffed upon, they will be scorned at, and they will be derided, and they will be hated. Maqbuhin, from the word qabah, qubh, ugliness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them ugly in the eyes of people on the day of judgment because they were ugly in this world. They were ugly because they did not believe in Allah. They were ugly because they were tyrants. And they were ugly because they did not care for the needs of other people in this world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will repay them the same way they paid people in this world. So this is the story of Musa alayhi salam, as you will see in the next section, which we won't do today. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this story to fortify the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to consolidate his position in front of the Quraysh so that his mission is also accomplished. Okay, the Quran is revealed to whom? To the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every ayah is for whom? For Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we must not isolate any ayah away from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the key to understand in the Quran. Number two, how does that apply to us as his ummah? That is where our lesson is, that we must take a lesson for our situation today in the world and see who is a tyrant, who is a Fir'awn, and who is the Miskeen Musa, and who are those people who will be delivered. So the story starts with Allah's promise that He wanted to favor those who are oppressed, and it now finishes at the end also by further elaborating this theme, and the whole surah continues with the theme, as we will see. Inshallah ta'ala. We will stop here. This is one segment, as you can see, and we'll continue with this the next time we meet, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah guide us all and give us His fadl. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillah.